Hi, I'm Roger Margolis, Research Director at O'Reilly Media, and I'm here with Janos Hajagos, who is an analyst with the Stony Brook School of Medicine. And yesterday at our workshops, you had done a workshop on the DocGraph, the opened up DocGraph health provider data, and Gephi, one of my favorite tools. And I just wanted to see if you can explain a little about how you're using the data and a little about what Gephi brings to the picture.
So the DocGraph database is a project which, it's a data set that connects two providers that are Medicare to each other. Now, you can go into technical details about how they connect, but basically you have a network of providers that connect with each other. And it's a very large network. There's 50 million connections for 1 million providers approximately. So it's a very large scale, very interesting data set. Mm-hmm. And for me, one of the interesting things is, for the past 6 years, I've been doing data analysis and on healthcare. This is the first time I get to talk to other people about what I'm doing and share. I think there's a lot that can be learned from, how we do things in isolation in healthcare a lot. Now we can do things in the open, and I think it's a great learning.
I'll just follow up on that. I totally agree, and I think that might be like the biggest change that's going on. Because when we think about that people are starting to talk more about this. It's like not that anyone was embarrassed about it, but you're encouraged now to.
Well, example, the MPI database, everybody has their own custom scripts for working with it. Now people are showing the custom scripts, and we're going to have a better database.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So you've got this data, it's got a certain amount of richness to it. Besides the social network, what else are you able to find in the data? So
one of the things I wanted to do with the data was to extract out subsets of the data, because it's so large, you really can't work. It's too big even to get your mind around in terms of how many connections. Right. And so I want to get subsets out, but also we want to annotate the subsets so it could be richer. And just to see how the data looks like, that was my first thing. Like, how does it actually look? And it's pretty surprising and interesting. And one of the things, and Gephi is a great tool for showing that. And one of the things that I think is interesting is you can see the social networking aspect, but then also the issue, I think, of fraud detection in the data set is going to be an interesting analysis to do.
That's great. So would you call it a feature-rich data set?
It is once you put it together correctly. Mm-hmm. So when you get the database, it's only 3 numbers, a lot of them, and it seems really hard to work with. But once you annotate it, then the richness comes up. So.
Well, you bring up something for the data scientists who are listening to this, that annotation taxonomies might be the most important but not talked about part of analysis. Yeah. If you do that right, data becomes rich. If you don't.
Yeah, and I think with taxonomies, we have, in medical things, we have 10,000 ICD-9 codes, right? Right. I don't know how many CPT codes we have. But to do analysis, you want to have less numbers, and how you map those up to higher levels is definitely a very interesting area. And
yes. So we're thinking about what you're thinking about getting into this stuff. So this was not unprecedented, but this was a big data set made available to the public. I'm talking about the National Provider ID data set. Any concerns about it going out to such a wide audience?
I think providers have to get ready. That data about them is going to be released, and it's not, we can see how things are working now. Mm-hmm. And they have to get used to that. My, one concern is it's very easy when doing data analysis, especially in healthcare, to make mistakes and to misread the data. And I think, people are going to learn. And I think that's something that my one worry. But I think, if we do it out in the open, people are going to learn.
Right. I actually think that's just a cultural change that has to happen. I think it's actually good that mistakes are caught, as embarrassing as it might be for the person who made them. But that's how science progresses.
Yeah.
Right. It's finding out, going after a truth that's elusive. With any health data, this conference is big discussion, privacy, security, all those kind of things, but mostly around privacy. And health data does seem to be different. Do you think that they're going to continue ratcheting up the kind of Snowden blowback and stuff like that, or do you think it's going to eventually fade over time?
Well, I think there's always going to be a risk. I mean, there's always sort of this risk where your own health or somebody's health information, if it can be used negatively, like in terms of can have an effect on your employment, there's always that risk. So even though this culture, let's say, is used to sharing a lot, certain information we're not ready to share. I think it's always going to be in the background. It's not going to go away. But I think through doing the right things, we can make that data more available.
Great. So we've actually been asking almost everyone this.
Yeah.
You're in this field. You're probably getting a sense of what you like and stuff. What do you see coming up next? What from your perspective, are you excited about?
Well, I like, the DocGraph it sort of provides how healthcare works, and it sort of provides that, how healthcare is put together. But one of my interests is, can we release data sets like the DocGraph, which get more to the truth of, relationship between disease and medicine and drugs. And so my thing is, how do you make such a data set available that's rich enough for analysis to finding these new trends or patterns and, preserve privacy? And I think that's something that I want to see and would be excited to, do analysis on that data set.
Right. That's great. The one thing I thought it might be worth spending a couple seconds on is just what is a graph? We've been talking about a graph. You talked about people and what you're talking about was edges, right? And stuff. It might be worth just a quick discussion of what a graph is, because it's not a thing with an axis and a line going up.
So we're used to looking at spreadsheets and tables, and a graph is about how two objects connect with each other. So it's that connection between two objects. And that's sort of a fundamental difference of how we're taught to think about data. And so graph kind of connects things, and then tools for analysis of the graph is very different than what you use in a traditional
That's right, because they have different performance characteristics, and you mentioned the 50-to-1 ratio. Quite often when you've got data that you're analyzing the graph, there's a lot more edges than nodes in it. I think if anyone who's listening doesn't know what a graph is, this is probably the time to start doing a little lookup, a little Google searching and figuring out, because it is an interesting, different perspective on data.
And even on, let's say, we're talking about data science, analysis of healthcare data, but even on the database side, you have products like Neo4j that are coming up, Titan. So there's all these projects that are developing graph databases because there's a need.
That's right, Graph Lab. And there was I think it was ChiGraph or Chi.
There's quite a few. But it's a very interesting topic, and you want to get more out of your data. Time to start thinking about it. Graph.
So great. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Josh.